I'd like to call the meeting to order, the Willits City Council. This is a special meeting for July 29th, 2020, 6:30 p.m. And we've had some technical difficulties around town, so bear with us. This we're on generator at City Hall from what I heard, so.
Yeah.
So keep that in mind, folks. Some of us have power and some don't, so some are calling in because of that. So due to the provisions of the Governor's Executive Order, actually, Jeff, go ahead and lead us with the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call. Councilmember Connie?
Yep.
Rodriguez?
Yes.
Strong?
Here.
Stransky?
Yes.
Mayor Gonzalez?
Here. All right, due to the provisions of the Governor's Executive Order N2520, which suspends certain requirements of the Brown Act, and the order of the health officer of the County of Mendocino to shelter in place to minimize the spread of COVID-19, the City Council members will be participating by teleconference or video conference in the special meeting today of July 29, 2020. And we have 4 items on a resolution ratifying extending the additional 30 days City Council's declaration of an order of an existence of a local emergency as a result of the novel coronavirus COVID-19 pursuant to Resolution 2010. We have a discussion, proposed adoption of a resolution authorizing the acceptance of Department of Justice Community-Oriented Policing Service COPS grant funding. Further review and discussion, possible adoption of a proposed fiscal year 2021 budget and master classification schedule for the City of Willits. Lastly, consider a resolution placing the City of Willits emergency funding ordinance for 3/4 cent general transactions and use sales tax measure on the November 3rd municipal election to prevent the elimination of police services, street, park, and sports field maintenance, closing of city facilities, and loss of other essential city services. Valid argument in favor and letter from the mayor and citizens. From the mayor to citizens. Right, we'll start off with item 2, resolution ratifying any additional 30 days. Will this be Stephanie? Stephanie?
Since we've already,
I'm sorry.
about this. Yes, I'm sorry, I was muted. I need to unmute. Did you want to just go forward with a motion, Councilmember Strong?
Well, that's what I was going to suggest, because you hadn't come on and we know the drill on this one. So I will move approval of the 30-day extension of the state of emergency.
It's like Councilmember Carney wants to.
I just had a question. We did this on July 8th, right? And so I'm just curious why it came up again so quickly.
Yes, because if we waited until the August meeting, it's over 30 days. So we can't be over 30 days between re-ratifying. Because our regular council meeting for August is on the 12th.
Do I have a second?
Yeah, I'll second it.
Derek? Second.
Yes, I'll second it.
Motion by Strong, seconded by Larry. Further discussion or any questions from the public? Not Kathy, call for the vote.
Councilmember Connie?
Yes.
Rodriguez?
Yes.
Strong?
Yes.
Stransky?
Yes.
Mayor Gonzalez?
Yes. All right, we're on item 3, discussion and proposed adoption of a resolution authorizing the acceptance of the Department of Justice Community-Oriented Policing Service COPS grant funding. I see Jim Robbins there.
Yes, good evening. This is Jim Robbins. Shall I go ahead and begin?
Please.
This is a brief introduction to this grant opportunity for the council to consider. So So good evening, Honorable Mayor and Council members. I'm Jim Robbins, a Community Development Specialist with the city. The city and the Willits Police Department have been informed that we are eligible to receive a grant from the Department of Justice COPS program, that's COPS, to pay for an entry-level sworn police officer. The grant will pay for the first 3 years of the position, with the city covering the 4th year. The new officer will focus on community engagement activities and crime reduction per the grant proposal, in addition to other duties. The council is being asked to discuss this opportunity and, if appropriate, pass a resolution authorizing the city manager and the chief of police to accept the award.
At this point, I'll pick it up to any questions of Jim. Council member has questions? Jim? No? Okay. How about anybody from the public? Oh, Jim? All right. I think the only thing I want to add is I applied for one of these several years ago when I was chief, and I wasn't as good a grant as this. The one I got required a match. This one, kind of uniquely, they do it sometimes, is there is only match we have is the additional 4th year, which is standard with all their grants, but they fund it. Is that correct, Jim?
That is correct. In fact, we actually requested the standard 75% per year with a maximum of $125,000, and checked the little box that we were a disadvantaged community and requested more. They actually, the grant series just went and gave us the full amount. So I don't know what we did in our proposal or what it is they know about Willits or our situation, but they offered us the full amount with no match except for the 4th year, unsolicited. So I thought that was nice.
The only thing from experience, it's not the person we're hiring that maybe does all the community engagement, but being an extra body, they allow the current officer to go out and do that community engagement.
Yes, that's correct, and it is my understanding that the program and the way that we wrote the proposal says that if this position is funded, the department will have more of an opportunity to do community engagement activities, and it sort of gives various options in terms of how the department does that, including either this officer or other officers doing other similar activities which can count towards the grant reporting.
And this is Chief Allen. If I may make a comment, please.
Go ahead, Chief.
Yes, thank you. So, honorable council members and mayor, this grant is particularly important, and we're so happy to receive it, particularly in light of the fact that we know there will be no school resource officer funding, and our acquiring this grant will allow that designated officer to continue community outreach and work with periodically with the schools as needed. Thank you.
Hi, Chief. Again, any further questions from council or the public?
This is Madge. I could move approval.
What, Madge? I have a motion from Madge. Do I have a second?
I'll second the motion.
Seconded by Sabrina. Any further discussion? Not, last chance to the public. Kathy?
Councilmember Connie. Rodriguez.
Yes, and I'd like to compliment Jim Robbins on successfully getting so many grants for the city, and let you know that we appreciate all the work you do here for the city, and I'm excited about this grant to help out with public safety.
Councilmember Strong.
Yes.
Stransky.
Yes.
Mayor Gonzalez.
Yes, and again, I echo what Councilmember Rodriguez said. Thank you, Jim, for your diligent work. Thank you. Right, at this point, discussion, item 3, discussion and proposed adoption of resolution authorizing the acceptance, Item 4, further review and discussion possible adoption of proposed fiscal year 2020-21 budget master classification. Is Andy here?
Yes, he is. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Good evening. For the record, Andy Heath, the city's finance consultant. What you have before you tonight is the final version of the preliminary budget. Keep in mind we're calling this a preliminary budget at this stage only because we plan on coming back to the city council in September, late September, early October, once we know what the true revenue impacts on the COVID crisis are on the city of Willits, particularly as it relates to TOT, transient occupancy tax, and sales tax. So it is the full intention of staff to come back to the council and bring you probably a pretty new budget, and tell you exactly where we think we're going to end up through the year. By way of this presentation that's before you tonight, and I'm sure Kathy is sharing the screen, so what I'll do is I'll, like I did last week, go through the slides, call out the numbers that I'm on. I'm going to do this presentation fairly quickly tonight, as most of the information has been discussed last week. Had a very robust conversation with the council last week. And one thing I will call out in tonight's presentation is just some of the changes that we've made pursuant to council direction and other staff information that came out. So I'm on slide 2. Yes, go ahead.
Andy, this is Madge. We had a power outage in the city, and I, for one, I don't know if any other council members do not have anything. I don't have a screen. I'm on the phone.
Oh,
so
wow. Okay.
I can't. So be self-explanatory with the slides. I won't.
Yes, I will. Absolutely. Okay, no problem. So I'm just going to go through what we've done to date and kind of give you an overview of some of the changes, actually the changes that were built into the budget since you saw it last week. We'll look at the general fund specifically, your 3 enterprise funds, and then your sales tax transportation funds, and then I'll share that police information at the end of the presentation as well. For those that do have the presentation, I'm on number 3. For the budget development process today, again, we did review all the fiscal activity that's happened through June 2020 for fiscal 1920 to try to come up with good fund balances, beginning fund balances for the current fiscal year, fiscal 2021. We did meet with departments and got good information from them that has been built into the budget with the different requests. Departments were asked not to request too much given the current situation of the budget, and they adhered to that, and the budget before you represents essentially a base budget without a lot of quote-unquote fluff built into it at all. Your council did adopt a continuing resolution that is continued basically until tonight, until you adopt the budget, presumably. We had the budget workshop last week, and then as I did mention, we will be looking at the budget again in a couple of months once we know what the revenue impacts, particularly sales tax, will be on the city. Slide 4, looking at your preliminary citywide budget, didn't change too much from last week. The total appropriations are about $18.1 million citywide. That's just under the expenditures column there. And if you'll note there, the general fund deficit is just under $695,000. So that went up a little bit from what it was last week, and I'll explain what that's for. Most of the other funds that have deficits, particularly the enterprise funds and your sales tax transportation funds, only have deficits because there are large-scale capital project programs that are built into those funds for the coming year. That's what those funds are for. So staff has proposed a little over a $6 million capital project budget citywide. On slide 5, this just goes through the staffing positions. We mentioned last week that we have 51 positions that are authorized in the city, and the breakdown is attached on that table. There are 7 vacant positions currently. Police chief is vacant, finance director is vacant, associate engineer. We have the COPS grant police officer that you just approved. That is also vacant. That is built into the budget, by the way. A dispatcher position, a maintenance worker 1, and then you have an operator at the wastewater treatment plant. One thing to note, of the 51.2 positions, that 11.67 FTE. Essentially, just under 12 positions are allocated to other funds from the general fund, and portions of, for example, the city manager, the finance director, and other positions that have a home fund of the general fund are allocated to funds like water, sewer, for the administrative and operational support that they provide to those funds. So 51.2 positions citywide. The next slide, slide 6, goes through and looks at those 51.2 positions a little bit differently. I take out the positions that are fully dedicated to water and wastewater that are wholly paid for by those funds, and that's 10 positions. So there are 41.2 positions that have general fund home fund staffing. And when you take out the 11.67 that I mentioned that are transferred essentially through the cost allocation to other funds, when you take out the city council, and when you take out the police department positions, the 16.2 positions there that are wholly funded by the general fund, you essentially have 8.3 positions left that essentially perform all of the functions, the general administrative functions, art functions, administrative public work functions, and community development functions that are charged to the general fund. So basically you have 8 individuals, 8 people in total that provide all of those services, which from my perspective, and having worked in this business for 30 years, never seen an organization that has that little support dedicated to the general fund core function. So you're doing an exemplary job with the staff that you have, and how you're doing it with 8 people is amazing. So just wanted to point that out. The next slide is the capital projects budget. Mentioned that you've got about $6 million in capital projects. Not too much change from what you saw last week, other than in the water fund. There was a project added for the California and Penn water main. So that project was added. It's recognized that the water fund has a pretty good fund balance, and to the extent the $2 million that is now budgeted in the water fund for capital projects can get done, the staff would like to do that. Keep in mind that $2 million does include the recent purchase of the solar array, so that is built into that, and that was, I believe, about $750,000, right around there. So a little over $6 million in capital projects that are, and in the general fund, only about $14,000, and that's just for some basic code enforcement equipment, vehicle lease, drinking fountains, and shade towers for the parks. Next slide, overview of changes since the workshop. So what I've synopsized on this slide is just what has been added to the budget or taken away out of the budget. In the general fund, there was an addition of $30,000 to fund an interim city manager with the pending retirement of the existing city manager. So with the existing city manager leaving, it's recognized that the city may need some additional funding to cover an interim city manager. So $30,000 has been added to the budget for that. We also added $30,000 towards the legal services appropriation in the human resources. I believe that would be with Cassidy Whitmore or another firm to deal specifically with personnel issues. There was a correction to the budget. There was an error in the budget last week that just left off of the summary page for the general fund, the code enforcement budget. Total budget of $33,000, so that has been added back, and that was in last week's budget, but just wasn't included in the total.
Andy,
no changes to staff or anything more.
Andy, can you hold for a moment? Can you hold for a moment?
Sure.
I have a completely different slide presentation up here. Hold on a moment.
I'm on slide number 8.
Correct, but it's not the same as what I printed today. So if you can bear with me a moment.
Okay, sure.
So Patty, I actually did access it on my computer because it's running on battery, and I have what Andy just said from what you sent out to us.
Okay, well, mine is coming up completely different. So
Wow.
I'm looking for what he sent me earlier today.
You want me to send it to you again, Kathy?
I got it.
You want me to proceed?
Yes, please. So
Yeah,
sorry.
most of the stuff is just it's a rehash anyway. Okay, so our code enforcement budget's corrected. We have an update to the engineering services budget to include $41,000 that is an increased allocation to other funds. In working with Andrea, we saw that it was too low, so we fixed that and corrected that, and that's consistent with what it was before in previous years. Reduction of the community services budget by $28,650, and this is pursuant to the conversation last week with the council. We removed the Little Lake Fire contribution in the community services budget because that is actually accounted for now in the cannabis compliance budget. So that was removed out of there, and then we also reduced the Chamber of Commerce contribution due to the anticipated lower transient occupancy tax receipts for the year. So the appropriate percentage has been applied to the extent, the regular amount comes in or a higher amount comes in, then we can increase that budget accordingly, but that'll be later on in the year. For the wastewater fund, just an increase to the engineering cost allocation. For the water fund, increase to the cost allocation for engineering, and then the updated capital project I mentioned. Sales tax transportation fund also got a share of the engineering cost allocation. And then we updated a funding source to include some D1 funding towards the Willits Downtown Improvement Project. That funding was not there before. After talking to staff, it's been determined that that funding is available for that project, and that's why you see that ending fund balance go up in the sales tax transportation fund compared to last week. And then the capital projects fund was just updated to account for certain project costs, but there are no new projects added in there. What is not yet included in the budget is the impacts of the very successful wastewater bond refunding that saw in information yesterday and today. As you know, the city refunded some wastewater bonds, and was very successful and is going to end up saving quite a bit of money over the term, the remaining term of the bond. So that is a very positive thing, and we'll build that into the budget when we bring it back in a couple of months.
Andy, that doesn't affect, I'm sorry, this is Madge, that doesn't affect the general fund, but it will enable us not to raise rates on the wastewater for some period of time. Is that kind of correct?
That could be correct. I mean, wastewater rates are made up of an array of different things, where it's operations, you have permit compliance costs, typically capital costs that are built in, maintenance, etc. But to the extent, any of those costs don't rise, disproportionately in the future, yes, you could maintain stable rates by saving a bunch of money on bond costs, absolutely.
Thank you.
Andy, I
Okay.
think the issue was just that any savings there just goes back to the wastewater fund. Is that correct?
Correct. Yep, that's right. Exactly right. Okay. On slide 10.
Can I ask a quick question?
Andy, we have a question from Greta.
I had sent an email just wanting to confirm that release of the restricted reserves. Is it my understanding correct that that money would go back into the wastewater reserve and no impact on general fund? I think essentially it's the same question that Madge had.
That's exactly right. Yes. Yep. You just don't have to. You don't have to hold that money aside for any purpose anymore. That money is free to use for pretty much any wastewater purpose.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Okay. All right. Looking at slide number 10, just looking at the general fund real quick. Not a whole lot of changes in the general fund other than the ones that I mentioned on the slide before. You do have an estimated use of reserves for the year just finished on June 30th, 2020, of about $304,000, $305,000, and then, as I mentioned previously, $695,000 for the coming year. Keep in mind that these amounts are adjusted for COVID, so sales tax and TOT have been reduced in both of those years, so they do include the impacts of that, and I do have a slide that will show you what that is. I have the revenues and expenditures in pie charts on slides number 11 and 12. Taxes obviously make up the lion's share of the general fund revenues, with sales tax picking up the biggest piece of it. You can see that the next largest piece is the overhead administration that's charged for general fund functions to other funds. So just under $600,000 comes back into the general fund as a source to cover certain costs that are budgeted for in the general fund. So everything else is pretty small in terms of a revenue source. Looking at expenditures, on slide 12, you see police there is the largest share of expenditures at just over $2 million. And what I've done with this slide is I've combined all the divisions for the different major departments and tried to roll them up into one piece of pie. But you still have a lot of pieces of pie you can see there. Police, a little over $2 million. And then you have your CalPERS UAL, which is the unfunded liability costs that are attributed to the general fund only, just under $600,000 there, and then insurance, $444,000. Those are two of the second and third or fourth largest pieces of pie. What I wanted to point out with the UAL and the insurance is that's over $1 million for those two things combined, and those are essentially fixed costs. There's not a whole lot you can do to reduce those costs, and the fact of the matter is these costs continue to rise year after year after year. The CalPERS missing their investment target of 7% for fiscal 1920, where they came in only at 4.7%. 3 years from now, you can expect that your UAL costs will be higher than what they projected they will be today. So these are just the reality of putting a budget together for a city where unfunded liability costs and insurance costs will continue to rise. And then you can see all the other departments in the general fund make up a very small share of the pie. Slide number 13. These are the proposed reductions for fiscal 2021 due to the COVID crisis. $282,000 reduction in sales tax, $55,000 reduction in transient occupancy tax, and then Prop 172 sales tax, which is also a sales tax, about $9,100 there. So just under $350,000 has been taken out of the general fund. So roughly half of the deficit is related to COVID. Keep in mind that you would have still had a deficit had COVID not hit, and would be about $350,000. These are the revenue sources that we'll be watching very closely over the next couple of months. We expect to receive sales tax data for the second quarter of 2020, March through June 2020. On August 20th, the Board of Equalization the California Department of Tax and Fee Administration will release those numbers to the cities, but that will just be the aggregate data. We won't have any business-specific data, but knowing what the aggregate number is will give us a good indication of where we're headed in the future. So August 20th is a key date there. Some of the general fund notes, just want to make note that this budget does include the negotiated salary increases of 2%. There is a transfer of half of the budgeted costs from the general fund to the closed landfill fund. This is something we need to watch because the other half is presumed to come from the county, and to the extent the county doesn't participate in that fund, this could be borne by the general fund as well. So need to watch that. No capital projects for discretionary capital projects out of the general fund go to the capital projects fund. UAL costs are increasing, insurance costs are increasing, and then also the payment for the fire services from cannabis revenues is in there at just over $81,000. Talked about the community services budget being adjusted. The next slide discusses so I'm showing what the deficits are. So the actual deficit incurred by the city in the general fund for fiscal 18-19 a year ago, $495,000. It's estimated that you're going to burn about $304,000 in reserves this year, and in the preliminary budget for the current fiscal year, fiscal 2021, is just under $700,000. Assuming all these numbers come true, particularly the last two, you'll have about $1.47 million left in reserves at the end of the year, which represents about 27.2% of your expenditure base. One thing I did want to point out is those red numbers are systemic, and something needs to be done to resolve the systemic budget deficit issue. All right, moving on, the airport fund. Yes.
Andy, I said, this is Madge again. I noticed the insurance in the pie chart is 444.7 million, or no, thousand, I'm sorry, 444,700. But it apparently only increased over last year by 16.5. I thought insurance costs were going up faster than that. Am I?
Yeah.
I'm going to jump in. This is Stephanie. That is, he just apportioned out the general fund portion. So our insurance actually accrues to our other funds as well. And so that portion of the increase is just the general fund portion for this year. We also, to try to keep the insurance rates from increasing, they also increased our deductibles quite extensively this year.
Okay. It would be helpful, which I'm sure is in the other documents, the year to year, including the note about now that we are putting ourselves at risk with a much higher deductible, just so we know why this is happening. Thank you.
Yep, absolutely. Good question. Okay, in the airport fund, I don't think there were any changes in the airport fund at all. So nothing changed there. You have a sustainable airport budget, $65,000 in working capital at the end of the day. The largest thing in the airport fund this year is the capital project that is funded by the FAA entitlement funds. Moving on to wastewater. In the wastewater funds, keeping in mind that for wastewater and water alike, there are no rate increases that are being proposed for the current fiscal year. And in the wastewater fund, you have $3.4 million in revenue offset by $3.7 million in expenditures, so using about $300,000 of fund balance. But at the end of the day, you will have just over $3.18 million that will continue to fund future years in the wastewater fund. The operating margin in the wastewater fund, when you look at the regularly occurring revenues, rates and such, interest earnings, and take away the operating expenses, you have about $300,000 annually that is contributed to the capital projects budget. So that's a good amount. In the water fund, $3.1 million in revenue, $4.2 million in expenditures. We only added the one capital project to the budget from last week that I mentioned, California and Penn Water Main. We're using about $1.1 million of $4.8 million in fund balance. It's estimated at the end of 1920. So you'll still have about $3.7 million in working capital to fund between a $3 and a $4 million budget depending on the year. So very good working capital there. And then the wastewater water operating margin is actually $913,000. Looking at your sales tax transportation fund, $1.2 million in revenues, and that increased from last week only because we added that D1 funding that covers a project that was already budgeted as of last week in the sales tax transportation fund. So $1.25 million in revenue, $1.46 million in expenditures, a use of about $211,000 in fund balance. We still have just under $2 million in fund balance at the end of the day, which is an improvement over last week, so that's really good. And your sales tax transportation fund appears to be in pretty good order. For the police special revenue funds that are related to the police department, I have 5 funds listed on slide 20. We have the narcotics forfeiture, the DNA cost reimbursement, health and safety restitution, vehicle abatement, and law enforcement administrative funds that all have a varying amount in them that is scheduled as of the end of fiscal 2021. So there's just over $100,000 that's available, keeping in mind that these funds, in certain cases, need to be used for a very specific purpose. They just can't be used for any discretionary purpose. However, they need to be used for law enforcement purposes, public safety purposes. So This is just a note to make sure everyone knows that these funds are available, and that the city should do everything it can to find out how they can use these funds so that they don't lapse. That is the very, very quick overview of some of the changes to the budget and the budget in general. Please keep in mind that we will be coming back with a more robust presentation in a couple of months once we know what the revenues look like and for your consideration. So with that, I will stop and answer any questions or comments that you might have.
Council members?
This is Madge. I just have one comment that I really appreciate the thoroughness of this budget and the understandability of it. It's very clearly presented. Thank you so much, Andy, and Stephanie too. But the community services, I understand that we eliminated the duplication of the amount for the fire district and reduced the amount for the chamber based on TOT revenue. But I would like that to be something we revisit when we look at the budget in September or October, because we're kind of stinting on things like the senior center and the food bank, and I'd love to be able to look at those numbers again if we have a chance.
Happy to do that.
Not now.
Okay.
Any match? Okay, Greta, do you have anything?
I got a question from a voter today who wanted an explanation of the increased budget for the swimming pool personnel. And I feel like we talked about this last week. I'm just hoping you can give a public...
Sure.
Thank you.
So swimming pool personnel are all budgeted at essentially half-time staff. So it's hard to articulate how much of any particular individual that provides services to the swimming pool, lifeguard, office help, whatever, is going to from day to day throughout the summer. So from a budgetary perspective, we just budget the worst case scenario, which is what you see before you. Very likely, more likely than not, you're not going to have all of those costs. And when I look at the full swimming pool budget, there are much higher costs in there than have likely been that have materialized in prior years. So it just depends on the use, and then it depends on how much people work. But this is a worst case scenario budget.
And because
they're all part-timers.
Okay, and then because we're having reduced usage at the pool because of the COVID situation, then it makes it even more likely that that number ultimately will be lower in actuality?
Absolutely, yep.
Thank you so much.
Yep.
Jenna, do you have any questions?
Yeah, I asked the question about the swimming pool at the last meeting, and I was curious how much it's costing us to keep the pool open, because the only use I'm seeing is just a few people with lap swimming lessons. And I had a question before, and I thought we were going to get numbers about what is it actually costing us during this COVID-19 period to keep the pool open. Have we reduced the hours that our pool manager is working, our lifeguards working fewer hours? Even if you don't give us the numbers, some indication that there's been a reduction in workforce hours would be helpful, so that we know that we're going to see that budget.
I haven't had an opportunity to do that yet, but I will make that a priority and try to get something to you.
That it, Sabrina? Larry, do you have any questions?
No.
Well, at this point, I want to open it up to the public. Anybody from the public would like to ask questions about our budget? Hey, I guess I'll bring it back up here, and I would be looking for a motion, as Andy has said, that we're going to be revisiting this probably First meeting in September, thereabouts, I'm assuming, Andy?
Yes, late September, early October. Yeah.
Greta has a question.
I'm sorry, I forgot I had one more. On the wastewater fund, we last year, or for 1920, estimated actual expenditures on clothing and safety supplies was about $1,700. And in this year's budget, we're suggesting $25,000. Is there an explanation for why?
So the only thing I can think of, and if the wastewater folks are on the line, they can answer too. But typically, what happens is when I do the estimate for 1920, and keep in mind that I had pretty good data when I put this budget together because we're past the fiscal year. So I put this budget together in early July with most of the bills were paid. So the numbers that were in the financial system, at least from an operational perspective, for supplies, materials, and such, were good numbers, and they weren't going to change that much. So what had been spent to date was about $17,000 in that line item. But it's more likely than not, that the original budget for that line item was $25,000. So I just carried over the budget from previous year.
Okay, but the last year was actually $1,700, not $17,000. And
For the
previous.
budget? Oh, okay.
And the previous years were
Yeah.
all in that range, so it just seemed like a substantial jump.
Hey,
Exponential.
Andy, this is Scott.
Go ahead.
I can help you out there.
Okay, go for it.
Hey, yeah, no, we never, that should be, it was probably a typo, I'm assuming, because there's no way we could spend that much money on safety supplies.
Oh, there you go.
Thank you so much. I thought that seemed pretty intense.
Maybe it was a 2,500 as opposed to.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. Absolutely. I think it was 2 in one fund, and 2,000 in one fund, and then 2,500 in another, and 5011 and 5013.
5011, 5013. Which line item were you looking at? I have the budget open.
So I'm looking at page 37, the wastewater fund, and it's under Fund 5013-5013, and it's detailed line, the third line down, 2010, clothing and safety supplies.
Page 37 of the most recent budget that was sent out?
It's the only one that I have that's a hard copy.
There was the one in the budget.
I got it. And which line item? I'm sorry, which number?
2010, clothing and safety supplies. Looks like we're averaging about 2,000 over the last few years, and then we suddenly added a zero.
Oh. Yep, that might be too high. That might be a typo. So I'll look into that, and I'll go back to my detail and see what's going on with that.
Okay, and then on that same page, if you look down on, I think it's, if my readers are actually working here tonight, 2081 other contracts. Last year we had an estimated actual of 45,000, and this year none.
And I'd have to look at where that number came from as well. That may have been budgeted in another area.
Okay.
So, okay, yeah, I'll get answers for you on that.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Greta. All right. Is there any further questions? At this point, I would be looking for a motion item.
This is Madge. I'll move approval of the budget with the very minor little corrections that have been mentioned.
Do I have a second? Do I have a second on the budget?
I'll second it, Larry.
Seconded by Larry. Okay. Any further discussion? Comments from the public? Kathy?
Councilmember Connie? Councilmember Connie?
It's not.
Councilmember Connie?
I'm sorry, I couldn't get my clicker. You know, I really appreciate the clarity of this year's budget. It is much easier to understand than last year. I have some, I recognize that we are in an extraordinary situation, and I absolutely understand we need a working budget to go forward, and that we will, this is really a placeholder until we have numbers in the fall. But I'm so uncomfortable this year, just like I was last year, moving forward with a deficit budget. I understand it's structural. I just feel so nervous that we don't seem to be making gestures to improve it. And I understand I've been told there's nothing we can do. We're putting it to the voters, and I'm hopeful that the voters will see the light. I really don't like this. This isn't the way I run my business. This isn't the way I run my household. I don't dip into reserves. But I know we need to move forward, so I'm going to say yes, but I don't like it. I know you don't need my editorializing, but I'm sorry. There it is.
That's okay. Councilmember Rodriguez?
Nobody's ever happy about passing a deficit budget, especially when we don't have a good plan in place to ensure that it doesn't happen at the end of the fiscal year. But I am voting yes.
Thank you. Councilmember Strong?
Yes.
Stransky?
Yes.
Mayor Gonzalez?
Yes, and again, good catch, Bretta, on that. Good key. All right, now we are on item 5. A resolution placing the City of Willits Emergency Funding Ordinance for 3/4 general transaction and use sales tax measure. Stephanie?
Yes, good evening, Mayor and council members. You know, this is a staff report that I have been working on for quite some time. As you know, during the last budget season, when we really had a chance to excavate what is going on with our budget, June discovered that we have actually been have this deficit budget situation and a structural deficit, meaning that even having minimal services, our situation is such that we are simply spending more than we make. The majority of a city's tax structure, particularly in Willits, comes from only 2 sources, and those sources are sales tax and property tax. And so there are 2 dials when you're in a deficit situation that you can twist. And those dials are you either cut or you increase revenue. Now, we have been cutting for quite some time, and we are down in staff, and we have cut to the bone so that now I guess I wasn't shocked to learn that we only have 8 general funded positions pretty much taking care of the entire city, and that includes finance, community development, city clerk, city manager, finance, parks and rec. And, you know, when I look at is there any way we can cut? We've frozen an accounting position that we really couldn't afford to freeze because we're so behind in our financing and just being able to keep track with our books. We struggle every year to get out paychecks because our financial system is ancient and needs to be upgraded desperately. So, you know, when you look at our revenue side, you see that our sales tax over the last 8 years has decreased by 8%. And we have no way to increase our property tax because of Proposition 13 and the fact that, frankly, our housing in Willits is stagnant. And hopefully in the future we'll be able to grow and our property tax base will grow. But for quite some time it's going to be stagnant. So we've gotten to the point where the only way we can balance our budget would be to figure out a way to take $600,000 or $700,000 out of the budget, and that would mean pretty much gutting the police force and going with one shift. And there's really, with the other funds, there are things we could do. We looked at our bonds. We refinanced everything we could refinance, and that was tremendously successful, except we can't float bonds for our day-to-day services. There's no way to produce revenue for those services. So it's really come down to we've got to increase revenue. Back when during the recession, all of the other cities in California pretty much passed the sales tax, the special tax, and Willits did not, which is why we actually have the lowest sales tax base in the region. All of the Lake County cities, most of them have a cent and a half of extra taxes. Fort Bragg and Ukiah both have a full cent, while we only have a half cent, and we have no major businesses increasing those taxes. We don't have a Kohl's, we don't have a Costco, we don't have a Sears, and so we are really struggling, and this has become the point where we need to make that decision of, shall we put this on the ballot for the citizens to decide on whether do we want to stay a city or not? And this is a tough choice. Oliver Wendell Holmes, our U.S. Supreme Court Justice from long ago, said that taxes are what we pay for a civilized society. And because we need a civilized society, we need police, we need our parks, we need, we provide all these services not only for our own residents, but for those residents of Brook Trails and those folks who live in the valley. We have our community center that folks have been married in, and the quinceañeras and all these wonderful events and if we're not a city anymore, we lose all of that, and this would be tragic. And if it were not up to this, I would not be bringing this to you. As you know, I'm going to be leaving at the end of this year, so this isn't, I'm not looking for, obviously this isn't going to benefit me personally. I'm not looking for a raise. I'm doing this because I really care about this city, and I know that I think it's the right thing to do to bring in front of voters. So the choice is, three choices to balance this budget, and the three choices are putting a sales tax, a general sales tax in front of the voters, or gutting half of our police department, in which I don't think and cutting our parks, and I don't think that the rest of the police department would stay if they only had one shift. That's sort of a paper solution, because it's not a real solution. So really the solution is, do we want to stay a city? And that's tough. We would and so I know that you've read the staff report. I know that you're all really good about reading these documents, and if you have, we have a wonderful consultant on board that put together the ballot arguments and the ballot statement, because when we talked about it, and I worked with the Finance Committee very closely with Mayor Gonzalez and Councilmember Strong and our consultants, and have asked lots of folks for advice, and our consultants came up with some really strong statements. They've been doing this for 30 years and have been extremely successful in passing these taxes. If you decide to put this on the ballot for our citizens to look at, I will be doing some Zoom meetings for the public. We'll be putting out information. While we can't spend taxpayer money on saying, please vote yes on this, what we can do is put out information and accurate information so that people know what their choices are. And I think it's imperative that we tell the voters, what's going on, so that they can make an informed choice. and our Larry Tramatol and Associates and Christian Garcia will be helping us do that and to frame that message so that it's clear and understandable to the voters. I guess I don't have anything more to add. This is something that has been keeping me up at night for a long time, and I do urge you to put this on the ballot, and so that we can bring this to the voters. And I thank you very much for your patience on this.
So, before I open it up to council, I just want to say that when I got on the council, I had a deficit. Like prior councils knew this was coming, and I think I feel like we did our diligence as a council. We looked at grants, trying to look for money that I think this council and other councils haven't looked for. And the reality is that that divide kept growing, and then throw in COVID and increased insurance and first costs, and didn't get any better. I just want to say that when I was at the police department from when I started when I retired, I started as an officer. We had a lot more officers back then, and the city dealt with their financial woes by attrition, basically. As people left, we didn't fill positions. One of the last things I did as chief was I cut out the administrative assistant and passed on the duties to dispatchers and absorbed a lot of the bill paying things to myself. I knew that didn't do any favors for the chiefs that followed, but that was just one department. It seemed like at meetings I always attended, it was always, okay, don't ask for more and cut. And it seemed like that was my career as the police chief, was always cutting. It's hard to do business cutting, but you do what you have to keep things running. So I heard, well, we cut? Yeah, we cut. And I guess I just wanted to put that out there. I know I took it to heart, and it'd be different if this was some other city and I was just kind of passing through, but it's my hometown. I want to see it. Just wanted to add that in. Obviously, because of the Brown Act, it's me and Madge, gentlemen, on this. At this point, I'll open it up to council. Council would like to weigh in?
This is Madge. I think I've already said this at a previous meeting, but I generally don't like sales tax because it tends to hit lower income people a bit harder. However, it does exempt food and medicine, and certainly doesn't include rent or anything like that. So it's really hitting. The sales tax applies to discretionary types of purchases. So I don't feel as concerned about that. And the other part about it that is really important to me is that way people that don't live in city limits but use the city for their shopping and for their recreation and for all sorts of other things where the city is actually providing services to them, don't pay us property tax and don't pay these other things. So their shopping in the city is a way for them to contribute to the city's revenues, as it also applies to tourists as well. So this is a way to spread the burden of revenues to run the city to people that are actually using the city a lot. So I think that's a fair thing to do. And the fact that we're like a half cent to a cent below everybody else in the region, in Mendocino County and Lake County, and there's no reason that our sales tax should be significantly lower than the average of those around us. That should also, we certainly have as much need to run our city as they do. So I feel that this is an appropriate and fair way to fund the essential city services, and without it, I think we really will not be able to sustain ourselves as a city. I feel like this is the right thing to do, and I hope that voters will feel that way too. So I think that's. I do have some comments on the mayor's letter, but I'll save that for later.
And I would just like to add that these are all can be taken separately, and maybe actually recommend that you take the sales tax measure and maybe take that by itself, and before we consider the other items. Okay, as a suggestion.
I'd love to hear from other people, and if the public has any members of the public want to weigh in on this, I'd love to hear from them too. Is anybody there?
Oh, sorry. Rena, Sabrina, Eric, you want to hear from the public? Sorry, I apologize. Okay. So at this point, let me open it up to the public, and then I'll bring it back up to this. So would anybody from the public like to speak?
Yeah, this is Ken Peterson.
Ken, go ahead.
How are you guys doing? Glad to be able to address you guys. I strongly am in favor of letting the public vote for the sales tax increase. As a lot of you guys know, I do a lot of community work with the Scouts, and I've done it with the sports and things. Helped out with Frontier Days and a lot of the community things that we have going on in this town, and I believe that is a invaluable service that the city provides. And as Mayor Gonzalez was stating earlier, the city as a whole has always cut back and cut back and cut back and cut back. So they've been very gracious to the community with not raising sales taxes, which has allowed us to have the lowest in the community. However, if we're looking at services for our town, as opposed to being just a community or a county community, and being able to have all of these services still afforded to us as community members and an identity as Willits, that's a huge what's the word I'm looking for? Pride thing too, right? And the fact that the city has given up so much to keep the sales tax down, and that we are the lowest in the county and surrounding counties. I think it'd be worthwhile to, at the very least, let the community vote on that and hear their say, hoping that at some point we can keep our community together and our identity as Willits and all of the services that we provide. As a Scoutmaster, you guys, to me, and the youth that I work with have been more than gracious in your support, and that is one of the first aspects I thought of when I had heard about the increase. So I am all in favor of at least putting it on the ballot for the community to decide, and I'll be voting yes, because there's no reason we shouldn't be at the same level as the rest of the community to provide the same types of services that the rest of the county provides to their communities. Thank you guys very much.
Thank you, sir. Would anybody else like to speak to the public?
Mr. Mayor, this is Ron Moorhead.
Go ahead.
Well, personally, from my standpoint, I dislike raising taxes, but I'll put my Chamber of Commerce hat on and say that sales tax is probably the most fair in taxes, because we also throw that tax toward gas and other items that people out from outside the area, just like your city manager brought up, but also the important tourism trade that we have. As you probably have noticed, since the county and the state opened up tourism into Mendocino County, even on a 50% situation, we have had a flood of tourists because people are tired of being locked up and they want to get out. And that will only increase as we go further into opening from a COVID-19 situation. I do want to say that the Chamber of Commerce has always been tied into watching what the budget is and knowing that our job is to not only help our businesses stay healthy, but also bring tourism to town and keep them here so our hotels, our restaurants, and our shops are healthy. We were working, before COVID-19, we were working on a number of projects that were going to bring more tourism into town, make our town more of a historic stop because the growth in history tourism has just taken off recently. We had negotiated tens of thousands of dollars worth of advertising and promotion outside of our county before this COVID-19 came in. We negotiated that to less than a quarter of the cost that it normally would have been. My board has been very strong in making sure that they do the best they can with the dollars that they have. And we're hoping that with COVID-19 and all the situation lifts that we'll be able to continue with those projects and bring more individuals into town. So it would be good to allow the voters to look at this to see how fair it is from the standpoint of what the businesses and what our city needs in funding. This is probably the most fair of taxes, if there is such a thing. But thank you very much, and if you ever have any questions on what we're doing at the Chamber, please reach out to me or any of the board members. We'd be happy to fill you in. Thank you.
Thank you, Ron. Anybody else from the public that would like to speak?
Mayor Gonzalez? Kitty? Hi, for the record, my name is Jean-Val McCord. Did you folks need addresses and stuff, or are we going fairly informal?
Just your name and that's it.
Okay, perfect. I know most of you know me by JV. I really appreciate it. I'm not actually a citizen of Willits, but some of you know that I'm actually the business representative for the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, Local Union 1245, and we, of course, represent the Public Works Water and Wastewater Unit for the city. Honorable Mayor Gonzalez and respected council members, I really do thank you for the opportunity of allowing me to speak to this body tonight. In part on behalf of our dedicated members serving the citizens of Willits, and also as an organized labor union that is dealing with this tremendous situation across the state of California and into Nevada with our service territory. A phenomenal presentation by Mr. Heath earlier, really laying out where we are and on what a small group of dedicated people in every branch of this city's services does on a daily basis, where I don't see that in other cities and agencies. You see many more people running a wastewater plant and a water plant, but our folks are dedicated in serving the citizens of Willits on a daily basis. And lately, coming off of that wonderful presentation, the words challenging, unprecedented, and catastrophic I have in my notes, they've been ringing in our ears since this situation started a few months ago. And through the lens of optimism, I think that those words could also segue into words such as changes or opportunities or creative measures, whose emergence does always require foresight and decision-making through strong leadership. Serious and difficult decisions these are, like the one especially in front of council tonight. They do need to be made to try and preserve the essential services that have come to be expected of the citizens of Willits. And trust me, we know, as an organization witnessing this in so many different levels, tax measures, such as the one proposed tonight, are one of those very difficult decisions that you folks will have to make in your service to the public. A true test of leaders who possess the foresight to seek that opportunity, though, and those creative measures, is what's important to their community. They know what's important to their community, and we understand, and I think we know that these decisions are never presented lightly or proposed without a lot of certainty. And from what I can tell, that's what we're seeing here tonight, is a lot of fact-based decision making about to happen. And I know that we truly believe that this is one of those times where the city's history, and in the city's history, that such a measure would be very much needed. Now, I don't profess, nor would I ever think of speaking on behalf of each individual and unique member that we have. I would present actually the local 1245 as a whole, and our members. We do understand the needs that cities have for this type of stabilization effort. And we do trust, actually we trust, because the folks in Willits know their community. They are part of that community. And we actually believe in when I'm talking to my folks, that the citizens of Willits, when respectfully educated on exactly what's happening here, can fully understand and support the tax measure. And with that, I understand that. I do appreciate it very much, but I think you can tell that 1245 and our members, we definitely support the tax measure. So thank you so much for allowing us the time to speak. Thank you.
Would anybody else from the public like to speak? Maureen? Okay, last chance for the public. Okay, gonna bring it back up to us. All right, Madge has spoken. Larry, did you want to say anything?
I have nothing to say.
Sabrina?
Yeah, I'm here. I appreciate the people who spoke today. I appreciate the presentation. It's evident that we need this sales tax measure to support the services that we have in the community. There's no doubt in my mind about that. Where I struggle is the fact that I haven't felt confident in the process of collaboration from the council to come up with a comprehensive plan of what are our values. So, for example, I saw in the paperwork that we want to see that our police department is going to stay intact. I want it to stay intact, but even more than that, if we're going for a 3/4 sales tax, I want to know that the council values public safety, and that not only are we going to ensure that we are serving our citizens at this level, but we're going to restore some of the positions that have been removed from the police department. As Mayor Gonzalez had mentioned before, as Chief Allen has mentioned, most recently the services that we're providing today are still bare bones. So I want to be reassured as a council that we as a group are going to make a commitment to collaborate and come up with a comprehensive written plan. What are our values, and where do we see spending the increase in funds? What are we going to stabilize? Where do we see potential growth? You know, if I just mentioned public safety, but if housing is a value that we've placed as collectively as a group, how much are we going to look at an additional position to support housing? Because we know in order to create more sales tax and attract more entrepreneurs to the area, we have to provide housing. So there's lots of things that are linked to this. So I am in support of this measure, but I would plead with each of you that if you vote in favor of this evening, that you also make a commitment as an elected official that you will advocate for a collaborative process for a comprehensive plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Sabrina. Britta?
Sorry, my clicker again. You know, I sort of view this as the Hail Mary. You know, our backs are against the wall, and we can't keep going the way we're going. And I have no problem putting this to the voters, asking them, what they would like us to do. I wish we had done this sooner. I wish that instead of burning through our reserves and getting down to a 27%, we had, moved this forward 2 years ago. I think this is going to be a really difficult time to go to the voters and ask for a sales tax increase. I'm a small business owner. Sales tax increases hurt my customers. It makes them think they're spending more. So that's real. That being said, I understand it has to get done. So I'm not going to stand in anybody's way on this, but I just wish it had been done sooner. That's all.
Okay, I agree with everybody else, and public. At this point, I guess, ask for a motion. Madge, you have something?
I just wanted to add that I had a brief conversation with John Haschek, who this is like secondhand, but information that the Sheriff's Department really does support us doing this because they don't have the capacity to police Willits, and they understand that without this, we basically won't be able to have our own police department. So he may or may not have contacted other city council members, I don't know, but he passed along that the Sheriff's Department very much supports this measure. And with that, I will move approval of this agenda proposed item.
Have a second?
Before anyone seconds, can I ask, are we going to be able to go over the Q&A and mayor's letter separately as Stephanie suggested?
Yeah. So, this is for so what we're looking for is a motion to authorize putting this on the ballot.
Yeah, that was my motion.
Have a second?
Yes.
Seconded by Sabrina. All right. If there's any further discussion? Public? Kathy, call for the vote.
Councilmember Connie.
Yes.
Rodriguez.
Yes, but I would beg of the council to please remember that we need to collaborate on a plan should this pass.
Strong.
Yes, and I do agree that this is definitely going to be a challenge to the council to plan forwardly going forward. It's assuming that it passes.
Thank you. Stransky.
Yes.
Mayor Gonzalez.
Yes.
Thank you.
Right. Yes. Next, would you like to tackle the letter or the Q&A? Greta?
I have comments about the Q&A. In the first paragraph, it mentions that travelers are not stopping in Willits as often as they used to. And then in the second paragraph, it says that most of travelers or people living outside the city will pay most of the taxes. I don't see how it can be both. So I feel like if we're going to sell this to the public, we need to be a little more clear about who's paying the taxes. And let's just be honest and tell the community it's their community. They want it to have services. They're going to pay more sales taxes. We don't have to include the travelers in this.
Hi, this is Stephanie. I think that the confusion may be when people are doing sales tax, a sales tax measure, we're voting, only the people within the city limits will be voting on it. And we're about 5,000 people within the city of Willits, but our immediate community is approximately 10,000 people who shop in Willits. And so those are the folks, and so perhaps it wasn't clear, it's not just travelers, but all those folks in Brook Trails and in the Valley, and those are the folks that are also not shopping local as much as they used to. And so it's actually, know people aren't shopping locally as much as they used to, but also it is true that about the residents of Willits will be voting on this are usually about half of the folks who are actually paying the tax, and maybe that can be explained a little bit more clearly.
I get where Greta's coming from, so I think that not trying to pull the wool over its eyes. I don't think that's our intent by any means. It's just,
Yeah, no, we can certainly try to clarify that.
did you have anything else about the Q&A? Nope. Okay. Madge. Muted. Muted, Madge. You're muted, Madge.
Okay, I apologize. I didn't get a chance to, I have different things on my screen now that I finally, my computer awoke, the power went back on. And so I didn't get as much of a chance to look at the Q&A as I would like. Is there still time to comment on that? Since we're
I want to say that we can absolutely take a few days to look at that. The time crunch was on the actual measure, and once we can move forward on the measure. This was going to be a letter, and it's going to be part of lots of information that we're going to be giving to the public. So we can certainly, I'm thinking we can take it back to the Finance Committee. I know that you and Jerry we can look at this one more time and clean it up a little bit, and before we send it out to the community.
Well, and I appreciate Greta's comments too. I think it needs, we want to make sure we're really clear and that we are really accurate, and that it's, so people that don't understand budgets and don't understand all that other stuff read this Q&A and go, yeah, I get it. So I really appreciate Greta and Sabrina participating in that too. Maybe can we bring it to the
I would actually recommend that we get this out right away. And I'm thinking if just because now that we've put it on the ballot, there's going to be a lot of chatter out there, and I would like the mayor to make the consultant has actually recommended we get this out as soon as possible, and he actually wanted to get it out like now, like this week actually. But we can certainly, I can work on it tomorrow, and if Greta and Sabrina want to, maybe tell you, and we can work on it a little bit and get it out. And this is part of our messaging campaign, and we are going to be putting out more things, and because this will not be the only message out there, but we want to make sure that we state the reason why this is an emergency, and that it is an emergency.
So as far as the Q&A, I think Greta's comment, we can a little bit of wordsmithing that can address that. If anybody else has comments, and I'd be happy to work with you, and if Jerry's available tomorrow on the Q&A part. So I also wanted to comment a little bit on the mayor's letter. It's very good, but there's a couple things that are not mentioned in there that I think are also important, and it's just a matter of adding 2 or 3 words here or 2 or 3 words there, which is parks isn't mentioned again. It's way up at the top, but it's kind of lost, that we would not be able to maintain the parks and play fields and all of that, the maintaining of those facilities, and community planning, planning for the future. To me, that's really important. And, talks about if you need to get a permit, you're going to have to go to Ukiah, but no one's going to plan for the future if we don't have a planning department. So I want to see that in the mayor's letter too.
I would look forward to working with you tomorrow on this, Madge.
Thanks.
All right, and just for you guys, you have to be chat in the afternoon, maybe after appointment in the morning, so. All right, so this is done, and vote on the rest of it. I think we just need to vote on the, is that correct?
Hey, Jerry, you're cutting out. We're only hearing about every third word of yours.
Thank you.
Sorry, it must be my internet. It's like blinking like crazy. So, you hear me better now?
Yes.
Okay, I think if I get too close, it does that. So at this point, Stephanie, you need to take a separate vote on the other things, or just those would be?
I just need direction on it, and as long as you've got it, I've got no objections. I'll work on this tomorrow with Madge, and we can send it out.
I guess if you have any suggestions, I guess, for Brown Act purposes, send it to Kathy and she'll get it.
Yeah, that's probably the best way to do it, yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Did I get something?
I think Sabrina wanted to add. Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, I'm scrolling through and I'm on page 126 of 129 in the agenda packet, the argument in favor of the measure. And I have a question because it says, if the measure does not pass, what does this mean? And it lists all 5 things. And to me, if I'm reading that, it implies that if I don't pass this, or I don't vote for this and it doesn't pass, that those 5 things will be eliminated. But it should mean that any of those 5 things could be eliminated, not necessarily all 5 of those.
Well,
we're not going to eliminate the police department, eliminate this and eliminate that. Does it have potential? Yes, but I just feel like the statement may not be.
So, hi, this is Stephanie. Actually, in the staff report, we lay out the different scenarios, and if this measure does not pass, if we don't have a police department, we don't have a city, and the city will actually close. I mean, if we don't do this sales tax measure, the city will need to decertify as a city, and we will lose all these things. I mean, make no mistake, this is why this is an emergency. We can't run on half a police department. We won't be able to retain any officers, and we can't, we would have to decertify. And that is what it is.
Okay. I hear you on, that would make logical sense for one, assuming that it didn't pass, then maybe it would impact 2 through 5. But
well, if we're not a city, we would not have a police department. We would no longer be in charge of Main Street because the county would take it over. And the fund that we now have that supplies roads, that is actually a half-cent for roads, that disappears because we no longer would have local tax. We would not have a local building department, and therefore people would have to go to Ukiah through the county's department. And our community center would close, unless the county wanted to open a community center on their own. It would close because we would have to close it. It would be part of the disincorporation process. And we would not have any parks or pool or sports field staff. So all of those things would disappear if we were not a city.
okay, I think you explained it well, and I see it from a different perspective after having you taken the time to explain it. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the question.
Can I just clarify too, that question is, in order to be an incorporated city, providing police service is one of the requirements. If you don't do that, then you don't get to do any of the other stuff. Is that correct?
Well, I think that if we were a city without a police force, then I'm not sure why we would do that.
I don't recommend it. I just wondered.
So, Madge, a good example would be Windsor is a city, big contract, but sent on the sheriff's department for their police services.
But we already know that if we tried to contract with the county sheriff, in this case, it would actually cost more than running our own police department. So that isn't a solution.
Well, the county's actually said that they don't even have the staff to do it, and Sheriff Kendall was like, no. He was very, very adamant that the sheriff's department even would not contract with us.
And I spoke with the sheriff this morning, Madge, and he reiterated that he was not interested in contract. And if it was forced on him, it definitely would not be the same service level situation. Or, if we were still existing as a city, we would have to talk money, and that's a separate conversation. So I think how we leave it now is, Madge, you and I, and if any council members have input, send it to Kathy. Discuss it, and maybe all afternoon chat. All right, I think that concludes our meeting.
Great. Thank you very much. I really appreciate everyone's input on this. This has been a tough process, and I really appreciate everybody's participation.
And I'd like to thank everybody that's spoke and it's on the line. This is us trying to fix things. I just want to say that covered all of this, and the last thing we want to do is for tax, but it takes to get us going and function. All right, thank you, everybody, and this point we will start.
Thank you.
Thank you.